What does your crazy neighbor do to be labeled the crazy neighbor?
She dug up my fancy flowers and replanted them in her own yard, 15 feet away.
I felt this. My crazy neighbor took my new blueberry and raspberry bushes and stuck them in her yard. She replaced them with sticks she found.
Ha, sticks. I'm cracking up. But seriously, how rude.
Had a neighbor who wouldn't let anyone use his driveway because he didn't want it to get dirty. Anyone including himself. He parked on the street outside. If he thought you were having a party, he would drag a bunch of plastic bags full of God knows what to the end of his driveway so no one could turn around it. One time I came home and he was outside hosing it down in the rain. To his credit, I've never seen a cleaner driveway.
Our neighbor would leaf blow during a windstorm. It wasn't autumn, so there weren't any leaves on the ground, just some other debris.
Used to live in a little town of 300 people where we had an elderly neighbor named Gladys. She would routinely look near our garbage can outside and take the recyclable bottles and cans we would leave for her. After we cleaned out a fish tank, we put the gravel and fake plants in a bag and left it on top of the garbage can because it was already full. About a week later, Gladys hollered at me while I was outside to come over as she wanted to show me something. She had taken that bag we had left and planted the fake plants along the side of her house. She said she wasn't real confident that they would make it, but so far they seemed to be thriving. I could only nod and compliment her on her green thumb.
Better than me, who just did the opposite. Moved my daughter out of college and stuffed her plastic succulents into a box. Weeks later she asked where the plants were so she could water them. But they actually survived. Tough little things.
My neighbor sits in his yard, hides behind his plants and meows at people who pass by. He is not dangerous at all, but he is not right in the head either. His caretakers are his parents and they seem to be very nice people. His dad once told me he just likes to be a cat, and left it at that. I didn't ask any more questions.
I would also like to be a cat, so I see no issue with this.
She has a penchant for going around sticking nails in people's tires at night. This has happened dozens of times to nearly everyone on the street, though she's slowed down since more people started installing video cams and motion sensor lights in their driveways.
Years ago we had a guy in our neighborhood like this. He stopped hitting our house when my crazy-ass mother came flying out the house around 3 a.m. with her baseball bat.
We had one a while back that had a meth lab in the home. Crazy fights, yelling at all hours of the night. Dude would wander around the hood tweaked out crazy, and once he threw a Molotov cocktail out of the second floor window at another dude who was smashing up his car, screaming, "I'll effing kill you, motherfucker." Those were interesting times.
So, he tried to burn his own car to protect it.
I had a neighbor who would sneak into my yard at night and roll up my sod. It would be laid perfectly the night before, but I'd get up in the morning and it would be rolled up just like it was when it came from the store. I finally got pissed and spent the night laying by my back door with a baseball bat and a flashlight, ready to bonk the crap out of whoever it was. Sure enough, they came around 2 in the morning, and I stood up, turned the light on, and was face to face with 4 raccoons rolling up my sod, looking for bugs. He eats my flowers. In his defense, he told us that he has been doing it for years when he introduced himself after we bought the house. He also brought over frozen cookies in a plastic bag, as a housewarming gift, but wasn't sure what was in them. We share a side yard, and as he was talking to us, I noticed his all-brick house was actually roofing shingles, layered to look like brick. It started to register that he may be a little out there. He's a great neighbor, just an older, eccentric stoner who keeps to himself and eats my flowers. No shame, comes over to my yard, and eats my lilies raw, or brings scissors and clips the heads to boil and make jam. It's crazy to me, but we have embraced it. I planted a couple raspberry, blackberry, and blueberry bushes 3 years ago, when we first moved in, on the side yard we share. As well as a few knockout rose bushes. I told him to help himself to berries, roses anytime, especially before the birds do. The bushes have all gone insane, and the entire side of my house is now a yearly buffet for my neighbor. Having a decent relationship with a crazy guy the first share a property line with, is worth some deadheaded flowers.
Your neighbor might be part goat.
Pulled us over pretending to be a police officer, saying that we had somehow broken the law whilst pulling out of our driveway and that she was going to call it in. She isn't a cop, lol. Edit, I considered using my dashcam video to actually call it in, but we had just moved in and I wasn't sure if she was the type of crazy to burn the house down or poison my dog. After chatting with the other neighbors, it turns out she's just a wannabe HOA president in a neighborhood with no HOA. So, mostly harmless. Just very annoying.
Pretty sure that's a crime.
Well, I used to have a neighbor who was legitimately mentally ill, although I don't know his actual diagnosis. His truck wouldn't start one day, dead battery, and he told everyone on the street that another neighbor was stealing the electricity. He knew this because of the way this guy parked his vehicle. Obviously it was sucking electricity from the ground for his battery, which drained the car batteries near him. Many times he would run down the street and warn everyone to hide their valuables because Japan was invading the country. He wasn't on DG, but he did take medication for his mental illness and everyone on our street could tell when he stopped taking it. Whenever he would start saying completely irrational things, we would remind him to take his medication, and he would thank us and go home, presumably to take it. He lived alone, and he was getting older, so I think he had a hard time remembering to take it. There were many, many more incidents. ETA. Thanks for the rewards. I've never gotten any before this post.
I'm glad the neighbors at least cared enough to remind him to take it.
I used to live in a HOA. One of the members on the board lived across the street from my neighbor and I. He sent a letter to us saying that we all have to mow the lawn on the same day, at the same cut height, and in the same pattern to create uniformity in the neighborhood. My neighbor and I intentionally cut on different days and in opposite patterns just to annoy the guy.
At my last place I had a neighbor that would remow my lawn if my lines weren't straight enough or if I missed a spot. Never found out who it was, but that was an incredibly fun summer. Only happened that year too.
Took my parents to court because he lost in our WA chairman election. Some people just have too much free time. Edit. He actually demanded we pay his legal fees after he lost in court. Twice.
I'm the WA president. I get elected over and over again because I just focus on things like making sure the buildings are safe and maintained, and that the grounds are reasonably cared for, or the pool is working. I had some guy come in and was all gung-ho about fixing all the things that were wrong. So I said, here, take the job, I don't have a lot of free time anyway. So he takes his year term and basically runs it like the stereotype. Everyone is annoyed. I'm still in the board, so I stop the things I can, but we have a couple other obnoxious busybodies on the board. So I orchestrate a coup. I basically make sure the busybodies on his side don't get re-elected to the board, and then get myself voted back in. He sued me. I think his attorney thought I would just back down. I keep an attorney on retainer because of various reasons. My attorney got the whole thing thrown out in such a way I could sue to costs, so I did. I then went back to running things the way I always did, except I fined him for every little thing I could for like a year. That was super petty, but he sued me.
This is similar to my parents' situation, except my parents were not running against him. They were just voters who voted for his opponent. She did a way better job maintaining the community, and my neighbor tried to sue for voter fraud. Keep doing what you're doing. Everyone appreciates it.
Next door lady standing on her driveway yelling at me because acorns have fallen from a large oak tree on my property onto said driveway, demanding that I cause the tree to cease and desist from this intentional criminal activity.
Fun fact from a law student. Trees do not in fact have the legal capacity required for intent.
He jumped in front of my car while I was driving down the road to yell at me for going through his trash at night. Told him it was probably raccoons. He refuses to believe it to this day.
This is my favorite one. Instead of moving his trash or getting locking lids, he stalks your car at night to throw his body in front of it to protest your suspected raccoon-like activities. All the while, the trash pandas are in the background, having a effing field day with his trash.
Years ago in rural Arizona we shared a pond with a crazy neighbor. More sad than anything, he was in his 40s and lived with his mother around 1988. A Vietnam veteran, he would walk out to our shared pond with a .45 and a box of 50 rounds. He would then absolutely unload on the pond while yelling, "Police his brass," and walk quietly home. This happened every 90 days for about 3 years.
In all likelihood, he was fighting a swamp monster that emerged every 90 days.
This woman lived next to us who needed to have the police called on her at least once a week. She would scream at her roommate at all hours of the night, go into a drunken and sometimes D-filled stupor, and scream at us while tripping out as we sat in our backyard. More than once I had to kick her out of our home because she walked in unannounced, beer in hand and drunk as ever. One time I called the police because she was screaming about killing someone and rolling around on her front lawn. Another time I received a call at work, 1 in the morning as I worked third shift. My GF informed me they had to evacuate the house because the neighbor's garage was on fire. Turned out either she or her roommate had done it while doing DG or smoking in the garage. She ended up moving away but would still walk to our house to ask for our lawnmower. She was not happy when I told her to get off my porch. My sister's neighbor reported my sister to the police because her kids were playing in my sister's garden. Not for the usual reasons, too much noise etc. Nope, because a volcano in Italy had erupted and the radiation would hurt them. My sister lives in the UK.
LMAO, I would have loved to see the police's face when they heard the reason. I cared for an elderly woman for many years. She lived to the age of 93 in a crime-ridden inner-city neighborhood by being as tough and nasty as any criminal living nearby. Her oddest actions involved her incorrect belief that she owned the road in front of her house. She didn't even own a car, but she insisted that nobody park there. She would confront them if they parked in front of her house. If they did it again, she slashed their tires in the middle of the night. Over and over for years. She was never caught, but everybody knew it was her. She only stopped when she lost the physical strength to slash a tire in her mid-80s. Then she started using spray paint on the cars. "He don't park in front of my house no more," was all the justification she needed to damage her neighbors' cars.
My friends used to live in a gentrifying neighborhood near the beach in my city. They had a regular apartment, but someone bought the building in front of them, beach adjacent, knocked it down, and put up a few luxury homes. This crazy woman bought one. She had a 2-car garage, and a driveway, and best we could tell, she had 1 car. But no one was allowed to park on the street in front of her house, which was clearly marked as a public street and where people had been parking since forever to go to the beach or because their building didn't have parking. We could see this street from their apartment. She went out and keyed any cars parked there. It took a while to figure out it was her, but eventually people saw her doing it. All the neighbors warned their friends not to park there, and people started putting up cameras to get evidence of it. Some dude with a piece of poo ugly as truck started parking directly in front of her house every day just to F with her, because he didn't care if she scratched it up. So she slashed his tires. It got to the point where every time she opened her door to walk outside, neighbors would cuss her out through their windows. One night she went out in the middle of the night, and painted the entire curb on that street red. Someone got it on video, several neighbors called the city. I think she got a talking to and a fine, and she had several insurance claims pending against her from damage to cars, and she finally stopped. Everyone still hates her though, even new neighbors, who were told the story of her from older residents.
Wow, that lady is crazier than the lady I knew.
This older lady lives across the street from me and she is obsessed with leaves falling on her lawn. To the point that she will come out of her house and pick up one individual leaf off the grass in the fall, or any other time. She spends hours a day outside with the leaf blower in fall. She will go and knock on other neighbors' doors if she thinks you have too many leaves on your grass. She'll come over into your yard and do it yourself herself if you're not home. What I think is weird is that she's in her 70s, no kids or grandkids living with her, and lives alone in a pretty large 4-bedroom house with an amazing in-ground pool in the backyard, with a slide and diving board and everything. Nobody has used that pool in at least 5 years, yet she opens it up every summer. Somehow she likes my family and has never once yelled at us about our leaves, and randomly brings things over like half-eaten gallons of ice cream and asks if we want it because she's not using it. ?
Sounds like she's lonely, bored.
The old lady who lived below me left me multiple cryptic letters blaming me for the birds chirping too loudly in the mornings. Not pet birds. The sparrows and poo outside. This went on for months. Edit. I'm flattered by the upvotes and awards. Thank you. To answer the most commonly asked question. Yes, for a brief period I had a bird feeder. I took it down after a few months after multiple cryptic letters. Eventually management got involved and took her side even though bird feeders were explicitly allowed per the lease. There were several trees nearby, including one that literally hung onto both her and my balconies. I assure you that birds existed before I set up the feeder, as they continued to exist after. My sister and Bill took over the lease 4 years ago, and they still get the occasional note from Bird Lady. Apartment management has even inspected their unit to verify there's no bird feeder or any other bird luring devices. Tears of joy. *** edit 2. *** I found one of the notes. Again, your bird dodo is on my railings, birdseeds on my porch and chairs, and your birds are ruining my night rest, wee hours of the morning, birds in your feeder chirping. Bird feeder was gone at this point.
I used to work nights at a hotel and those were always my favorite calls to get. **, yes, hello? The crickets outside are really loud and we can't sleep, **. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'll just go have a word with them and see what we can do, **. This happened disturbingly often. I'm still not sure what they actually expected me to do about this at 1 a.m.
Tears of joy, yes. I'm flattered you think I'm powerful enough to control the birds, crickets, but alas, I do not possess that skill.
When I first moved in, my neighbor walked into the house, unannounced. When my wife gets home, sometimes she wants to stay in her car having a phone conversation. He will come out and walk down the side of his house, checking his sprinkler controls, and looks at my wife. He has 2 huge bushes he refuses to cut. It blocks our view of backing out of our driveway. The fire department came by to clear trees and bushes around the fire hydrants. The neighbor came out and yelled at the fireman. This bush is older than you. Needless to say, I hope there are no house fires.
My neighbor used to do that too. When I first bought my house, and was renovating it, he would just walk in. Then I caught him in there once when I wasn't there. Then he asked me about the drain running out of the side of my house, which he wouldn't have known about unless he was in my basement. That's when I changed the locks. 15 years later he's still nosy as all hell. Edit, to add some details, I hadn't yet moved into the house, which is why I hadn't yet changed the locks. Also, my basement is only accessible from outside the house, and has a separate door that didn't lock at the time.
Day MMNM. Maybe he knew the previous owners. Still creepy.
She stalks us. Like every time I get home she'll walk outside and tell me I was either 3 minutes later getting home this time or that I'm home 2 minutes earlier, and then ask me why. One time my friend and her sister came to pick me up. The neighbor was against her window with her hands and face pressed up on the glass trying to look at who was coming to pick me up. My friend and her sister were so terrified they called me telling me to hurry up because a crazy lady was staring at them through a window. I replied, "Oh, it's just the stalker neighbor. Yeah, that was a funny day."
I once had a red-headed 5-year-old neighbor named Bruce who would do exactly this. I worked at a doctor's office and we had to wear a certain color of scrubs on certain days, so annoying, like just pick one color. I sometimes struggled with this and would forget to have the right color washed and ready, so would have to wear the wrong color that day. One day I pulled into my driveway after work and Bruce was in his front yard waiting for me. He said, "Hey, you're wearing blue and Wednesday is supposed to be purple. You wore the wrong color today." He must be about 21 now. "You were an absolute trip, Bruce. Hope everything is going okay."
We bought a house, and on the day while we were unloading the first truckload, the neighbor came into our garage uninvited and started telling us what trees on our property he wanted us to cut down. Not the craziest, but the effing audacity of some people.
Along those same lines, my parents moved back down to the family farm after they retired. Neighbor shows up to inform him of the arrangement whereby everyone has agreed to allow the neighbors to ride horses, ATVs, etc. on each other's land. Except, my parents had the land, 100+ acres, while the neighbors had residential-sized lots. Also, my parents were never part of these arrangement discussions. So, the audacity, indeed.
Not sure if this counts as crazy, but I have this neighbor who is part of a spiritual organization called Brahma Kumaris. Every time someone in the neighborhood is going through rough times, especially deaths in the family, she goes to their house and instead of offering condolences she preaches how they should join this organization and things will be better. She doesn't acknowledge anyone the rest of the time except the time when someone dies or a new family moves in the neighborhood, to whom she preaches and gives books written by leaders of the organization.
Yikes, it sounds like a cult.
The stuff she talks makes me believe it too.
He murdered another older neighbor lady, beat her to death with his bare hands. In the middle of our town home complex. Well, it was actually her daughter and granddaughter that are my neighbors, but she was visiting them like she does every week. Next thing you know, detectives are knocking on my door seeing if I knew any information about him or the incident. The only thing I knew was he was always arguing with other neighbors. I looked him up on Facebook after the detectives left, and he had posted he was going to kill her 30 minutes before he was going to do it. Took pictures of her car and her daughter's house and posted it on Facebook with her address saying, "I'm going to get the bitch." Then after it happened, he got the red-headed old bitch. It is just crazy to me that at 5:30 p.m. broad daylight, just a couple yards from my door, he killed her and no one saw it happening. Edit to add, investigation is still ongoing. I'm not sure why it's not first-degree murder, and according to other neighbors they've had confrontation before. Right now his charge is second degree with intent. Next court date isn't until Sept. Here's a better article. Link.
Had severe anger issues and yelled at anything or anyone he didn't like on the street. A few years ago he had a road rage incident, and when he started banging on the other car's windows, the occupants got out and beat him badly. During this he had a heart attack and now barely has enough mobility to walk to the mailbox and back. Also, he doesn't yell anymore.
If you are not ready for face punches, you are not ready to punch faces.
They adults in the family let their small, but surprisingly aggressive, dog out unleashed and without a muzzle. We live right next to a very busy road and public sidewalk, and the dog will often chase children and bark at other dogs, cars, people. It's a mess and they ignore any reasoning. Funny enough, their children always have the dog on a leash and apologize if he goes after anyone.
My neighbor was an 85-year-old widow that lived alone. She had 2 vehicles, a car and truck, and over the course of a few months I realized that she was no longer parking her car in her garage like she had for the many years prior to that. Then suddenly the truck wasn't being parked inside the garage either. Turns out she no longer had room in her garage to park her vehicles because she was walking down to a residential construction site about a block away every evening, and she'd grab 2 2X4s and bring them home. She had over 500 boards stacked in her garage, and when she was questioned on what she was going to do with it, she didn't have an answer. Edit. Bonus crazy neighbor stories. Asterisk, I drove 16 hours straight, pulled in my drive, and crashed on my couch immediately. Must have left the garage door open because I woke up to the neighbor lady shaking me to see if they missed my newspaper delivery that morning also. Asterisk, neighbor lady thought I didn't clean up after my dog in her front yard. I had never owned a dog. So she retaliated by walking around the neighborhood with a garbage bag, picking up every bit of dog poo she could find, and dumped said bag of dog poo on my front lawn while I was standing in the front window watching. Asterisk, ran up over $300 on 1 month's water bill of mine because neighbor lady was hooking her sprinkler up to my water when I'd leave for work in the morning and would let it run all day until right before I got home from work. Asterisk, she would put up an ugly orange snow fence between our yards in the fall to keep my leaves out of her yard. Me pointing out that I only had pine trees did not dissuade her from the decision to leave the snow fence up. Edit number 2. Asterisk, day 1 I should have known something was fishy with this lady. Literally, day 1. I closed on my house at 9 a.m. and had a roofing company at the house waiting for the call that I closed. We spent the day ripping off the old layers and getting bundles up on the roof for the next day. It was hot out, we were exhausted and all sitting in the front yard cooling off when neighbor lady walked out of her house, down the sidewalk to my house, and without even acknowledging the 6 of us staring at her, she walked in the front door and had herself a look-see. Asterisk, she hated dandelions. I found this out the first year that I lived there when I noticed that my lawn was dying off in an extremely weird way. Almost as if someone was spraying WD killer on the stream setting trying to snipe dandelions from 20 feet away. That's literally what she was doing. Asterisk, being the nice guy the first am, I would clean her driveway off in the winter because I had a snowblower. She would never thank me in person, but instead, she'd come over to my house after I had finished and would leave a bag on my front door that usually contained whatever expired goods she had in her pantry. Some of the standouts for me was like a dozen cans of 10-year expired Chef Boy RD, SP, stuff, and once, a half a bag of wheat flour.
Did you manage to get the money back off her for the water? And what happened with the dog poo?
I didn't try to get the water money back. I had a lot of guilt at the time because she was elderly and a widow. My solution at the time was to keep the exterior water shut off with the valve inside the house. When I confronted her about the dog crap, she said she'd send her son over to clean it up one of these days. She was capable enough of collecting it the first time. So I ended up doing it myself right away because of how atrocious it was.
The neighbor behind us had a leak in his water pipe and, rather than fix it, he just had the sump pump drain it out into the backyard. This meant that all year round the back of our yard was a little bit damp. Eventually, the leaky pipe burst and filled the house with 5 feet of water. His solution to this was just to keep the pump running and flood the entire neighborhood. After about an hour, a posse of all the neighbors whose yards were being flooded confronted him and called the city to shut off the water. The city fixed the water pipe and the neighbor ended up with a large fine. At least my yard stays basically dry now. I should also mention that this neighbor once rented the house out to a bunch of crackheads and it nearly burned down because the ex-girlfriend of one of these morons snuck in and set the house on fire.
I've heard way more than I need to about their health ailments and bowel movements. One night I'm in the backyard sitting in lawn chairs watching the stars with the wife when she pops out with a flashlight in our faces. I went off, "What the f***ing hell are you doing?" She apologized and left with no explanation. I could go on, but then I may start thinking about moving again.
I'm sorry, but what the f flashlight?
Called the police on people parked perfectly legal in front of their house, took pictures of my partner's dad just working in the yard, disappeared suddenly without a trace and then suddenly come back home in the dead of night 8 months later. Weirdos.
That sounds a lot like jail. Quite possibly for stalking.
Ours is the classic retired old man, terrible health and literally nothing going on in his life. He's not married, and I try to stay out of everyone's business, but I don't believe he has any kids. Rarely has visitors. I think he had a dream once of being a police officer but never quite made it. So he's taken it upon himself to be the neighborhood police person. He spies on everyone and makes it his business to know everything. My favorite encounter was catching him literally camping out in my front yard bushes early morning, spying on neighbors a few doors down. He had a coffee mug, notepad, blanket, literally just hanging out in my front yard making notes about the weird folks who were likely doing DG at home. When I asked him what he was doing, he just didn't seem to understand that it was inappropriate. He seems to like us, so it's nice, I guess, but he creeps me out.
She called the FBI on me. Then she would call Crime Stoppers on me.
What did she think you were doing?
She calls the city on everything. Ever walk out, look at your yard and think, yep, I need to mow this weekend? That is the point where my neighbor will call the city and complain that my lawn is too long. If I park on the street, she will call the cops and complain that my car is an abandoned vehicle even though it has current tags and is parked in front of the house it's registered to. The cops got tired of dealing with her and told me I need to park in my driveway and that I cannot park in the street or they'll tow my vehicle. If she sees my dogs outside, she calls animal control and claims they're being neglected and abused. She is currently going around the neighborhood telling people that I am poisoning her cats, which I'm apparently doing a horrible job of since the cats are healthy and very much still around. She is a truly awful person who is very much mentally unstable. She doesn't just do this to me though. Other neighbors on the block complain about the exact same thing.
The cops will tow you if you park in front of your house. You need your property taxes refunded then.
We used to live next to a woman that would have a disco party for her cats in her backyard at 2 a.m. every few days. She would put up a disco ball and party lights with music playing. It was a little bit odd, but what made it crazy was her dancing like a Native American performing a ritual around the disco ball. It's honestly one of the strangest things I've ever witnessed.
Does she send out evites or something? How do I get on that list?
This guy is weird as hell. Okay, so he plays VR in a large bunny onesie. Like the kind the kid gets in A Christmas Story. Which you know, cool. I guess you do you. But he plays with his window open so everyone can see him, and on top of that he plays, from what I can tell, exclusively military sims and never breaks character. You can hear him yelling stuff like, "Contact 30 clicks south by southwest." Or stuff down reloading, ready up. The guy will throw himself to the ground, and I mean throw himself. The few times I've spoken to him or seen him in person, he's had bruises on his arms and face from hitting the ground. And that's only what I can see from his window. Other than that, at night you can hear the guy grinding, hammering and drilling on something. I dunno, he's weird dude. He says he works for the government, does contractor work. He has really nice stuff, expensive stuff, and new vehicles all the time. He can't carry on a conversation. Starts getting nervous and will break away as soon as he can. He was home for a few weeks, said he was in between contracts, and I managed to talk to him a bit while he was setting stuff outside. That stuff he was laying out. A rucksack that had seen some heavy use and everything from medical and survivalist camping gear to empty magazine holders and a plate holder for bullet-resistant plates. He said he was letting them air out since he was planning on going on a backpacking trip for a few weeks. Weirdest part is he leaves almost every night between 9 to 10 p.m. Probably to get some of the junk food he'll leaving his car occasionally, but every night? I like to think the guy's a secret agent and uses the VR poo as an excuse to explain away bruises and cuts. Either way, I feel sorta safe. He's genuinely nice when he does talk to you, just in that I haven't spoken to another human being for years kind of way. You go, Secret Agent Bunny. Saving the world one hop at a time.
Well, before I moved back into the house, our tenant thought he saw our neighbor watching his daughters and decided to stab the neighbor. So anyways, we came to the house and it looks like we had to get new sliding glass door and front doors since the police broke them down to get to my tenant. It is his second offense, so he is in prison for life. So my neighbors probably thought my tenant is the crazy one.
Oh, Jeanette, may she rest in peace. We rented a house from my mum's co-worker. Our landlord grew up in this house and was renting it out. Across the street was Jeanette, an 80-ish-year-old lady, who had lived in that house most of her life and knew our landlord very well. Well, because she knew the landlord, that meant she felt she could come into our house whenever she wanted. She watched us through her window and had every excuse to come by. I have never really locked my doors, but obviously we started to. It didn't stop her. If she knew we were home, she would ring the doorbell incessantly. Our blinds always had to be down, living room lights off, so she wouldn't know we were home. Just got in? Quick, run inside before Jeanette sees you. We saw her peering out of her blinds on a regular basis. One morning the doorbell was going. I hid in the bathroom to pretend like I wasn't home. How did she see me? The doorbell stopped, but the doorknob kept rattling. She tried for 5 full effing minutes to open our door. Probably would have been longer, but I gave up and let her in. Why didn't I tell her to F off? Look, I'm a nice Midwestern girl. I can be confrontational if someone is being mean, but she was just lonely? A tad crazy, but harmless. Some notable things that she did, said. My husband was cooking when she came in and called him a good little housewife. Told our neighbor he shouldn't be dating his daughter. They were, of course, not father-daughter, and were in fact a 40-year-old couple, and there was not actually a big age difference. My favorite was when she was in our living room. She very suddenly crouched down and peered out of our blinds and said, "Look at those fat people walking that skinny dog." After we started locking the door, our doorknob rattling like she was trying to break in, and the doorbell was a consistent thing. My husband tells that story so well. It's like she was a character from a sitcom. We didn't know these people existed. She was eventually put into a home and passed away about a year or so later. Edit, my dad recognized the story and found my Reddit account. Hi, Dad.
We have a neighbor we call the Screamer Lady, because when her kids were young she would basically sit at her window and run out and scream at anyone driving by if she felt they were going too fast, ranting about the safety of her children, who may or may not even be home at that point in the day. To this day she still sits and studies traffic and glares at motorcycles. Her kids are grown thankfully, so the screaming has ceased.
I saw the neighbor across the street, a woman who looked to be about 45 or 50 and had only been living there a few weeks, wander into her next-door neighbor's house while they weren't home, wearing no shirt, just a bra, and then like 5 minutes walk out muttering to herself, nothing in her hands or anything. She kept walking in circles in her driveway, muttering. She lived by herself and this was concerning to me, so I called 911. Cops showed up and talked to her. During that time the owners of that house showed up and I told them what happened. They said nothing had been disturbed or anything and they had never talked to that woman before. Shortly after that an ambulance showed up, took the woman away, and I never saw her again. Like a month later some people showed up to take her things out of her house.
My house backs up to a resort. I'm slowly accumulating junk cars near the property line. Eventually they'll build a fence. Then I'll get rid of all the junk. Bam, free fence.
Ah, are you the crazy neighbor? Former crazy neighbor, here. I, 23 at the time lived alone in a basement unit in a not great part of town. My bedroom windows, being in the basement, lined up directly with a very busy street filled with bars and lots of traffic. While smoking cigarettes on my stoop, I often had a knife or baseball bat physically with me. To my neighbors, I often referred to a live-in boyfriend often, even though I lived alone. At times I would go as far as yelling at my fake boyfriend in my apartment when I heard other people in the hallway, storming out of the apartment and telling my neighbors what an asshole my boyfriend was. Also, my neighbors believed I didn't live alone.
I lived alone when I was single and had a female cat I named Fred so I could yell, "Fred, I'm home," when I came home at night.
I did this with delivery drives. When they called to say they were there with my pizza, I would hold the phone away from my mouth and say, "Do you want to get it or should I?" Oh, the joys of being female.
I used to rent the basement apt of the neighborhood crazy lady. Her car was decorated with thousands of rocks that she glued all over it. The property was incredibly overgrown. She had 5 unlicensed dogs, 2 cats, turtles that lived in her bathtub, pigeons, chickens, a rooster and more animals that I can't specifically remember, but I do remember counting them all up. She had something like 17 animals upstairs. She'd regularly practice saxophone while the dogs howled along with her. She didn't have a job and spent every day going on Craigslist free and picking things up. There was a room in the basement where she kept all of the stuff that was 3 to 4 feet deep and completely packed. I remember a cardboard stand-up of Captain Kirk and one of the Statue of Liberty sticking out of the hoard. I desperately took a job as a door-to-door solicitor for a short time and was randomly assigned to my neighborhood. When I introduced myself to the next-door neighbor and said what house I lived in, they were about ready to wring my neck. Haha. I told them, yeah, it probably sucks living next to her, but I actually live there, so yeah, no sympathy.
I used to live next to that screaming guy. It was a cheap apartment and hearing through the walls didn't take a lot of effort. He would yell pretty regularly, at the phone, TV, something, we could never figure out what it was. It was always during the day and we could never find sporting events that corresponded to the yelling times. He was always polite and soft-spoken when we interacted with him in person. Edit. And he lived alone and didn't have any pets we were aware of. The complex didn't allow them and we never saw any. Edit 2. Gaming seems unlikely demographically as he was in his 50s in 2006 to 2008, when we lived there. He was a bit outside of the gaming into adulthood generation. Not impossible though.
He was gaming.
My neighbor in the flat upstairs likes to stand outside my open, ground floor, window at 6 a.m. and argue with her dog. Like, I know you don't want to go home yet, but if you don't stop being a DK you're not getting your sausage roll. Or, I'm not the one who wanted to go out, so what's your problem? Happens at least twice a week.
I argue with my dog at 7 a.m. Try not to be too loud, though.
I may be that crazy neighbor. I have 300 houseplants. From the outside looking in, it looks like a jungle.
Anyone else here suddenly realized the reason you don't have a crazy neighbor might be because you're the crazy neighbor? Edit. I have thoroughly enjoyed the stories from all of his crazy neighbors.
I mean, I am the one looking at putting up a bat house. And trying to figure out how to keep the crow around but stop it from leaving eviscerated animal remains in my birdbath to chill.
Stuck a effing barbecue fork in my cat. Edit. You, when did this blow up? Thanks for the rewards, smiley face. Edit. There are too many comments I can't answer, so here you go. The cat is fully recovered and we couldn't get police because no one saw it happen. Happened on the day they moved in. They are from a country where cats are apparently worth nothing. My mum told me this. Edit. I guess they did it because they didn't want the cat at their house, but the cat was used to it from the old neighbors.
Holy poo.
Yep, smiley face.
His doghouse has electricity. The doghouse sits there in his backyard at night with a light on, radio going, the dog loves listening to the radio, apparently, and a small electric fan in summer to keep him cool. It's not so much crazy as, perhaps, a bit eccentric. How many doghouses have electricity, lights, fans, and a radio playing for the dog's enjoyment?
That dog's has it better than some humans.
Not crazy, but face with rolling eyes. She takes 2 hours to mow her lawn, which includes getting down on her hands and knees next to said mower while it's running to meticulously pull any WD she finds or address whatever issue. She will call my husband at 10 p.m. to let him know she's not home but that so-and-so will be stopping by her house to leave their car or do whatever, but don't worry, this is an authorized act. She lets us know that she will be out of town for a period of time. Can we keep an eye on her house? No problem. Also, the police have been informed of her departure. She called the police on a fox in her yard because it was acting weird. The police came and checked it out and says it was okay. I had seen the same fox the day before and it was a juvenile. I think she just startled it, hence the weirdness. Those are the ones that come to mind.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.